It's 10 a.m. on a random Friday when these arrogant tourists literally laughed at their parachute guide, ignored all warnings, and even made fun of him. Guide Cal Merritt was the last one to see them alive. One of them is Owen Hartley. He had done 200 skydives. He knew that number by heart. He said it within the first 5 minutes of meeting his guide at the Moab, Utah drop zone, not as small talk, but as a credential. A preemptive argument, a way of saying, I already know what you're about to tell me. What Owen did not know is that skydiving and base jumping are not the same sport. They share a parachute. They share almost nothing else. In skydiving, you exit an aircraft at altitude typically between 10,000 and 15,000 feet. You have between 30 and 60 seconds of free fall. Time to assess, time to correct, time to deploy a reserve if the primary fails. Base jumping from a fixed object in Moab gives you none of that. Exit altitudes are often below 400 feet. Free fall is measured in seconds, not minutes. There is no meaningful window for a reserve deployment. The margin between a clean jump and impact is not seconds. It is fractions. Owen's guide had over 800 documented base jumps in that specific canyon system. He explained the difference. Carefully, with a whiteboard. He walked Owen through the exit point, the wind conditions that morning, and the reason the recommended deployment altitude had been adjusted upward by 40 feet. A thermal layer was sitting unusually low in the canyon that day. Owen listened, but Owen had done 200 skydives. He asked if he could move the deployment lower. The guide said no. Owen asked again, framing it differently. The guide told him there was nothing to discuss. Owen smiled, not aggressively. It was the smile of a man who has decided the person speaking does not quite understand his level of experience. He adjusted his own deployment handle on the walk to the exit point. The guide saw him do it. He issued a formal verbal warning, the kind that gets logged. Owen nodded. The thermal layer was sitting at 280 feet above the canyon floor. Owen's adjustment put his opening sequence directly inside it. The parachute entered a collapsing air pocket before it could fully inflate. There is a concept in base jumping called a horseshoe malfunction, where the canopy deploys but wraps around the jumper rather than opening above them. It is survivable at high altitude. At 280 feet, it is not a malfunction. It is a conclusion. Owen Hartley had done 200 skydives. His 201st jump lasted 4.3 seconds. Felix Crestwood had a paragliding license. That part was true. What he did not mention to the guide in Interlaken, Switzerland, was that the license had been issued in Mendoza, Argentina at an altitude of 900 meters in dry Andean air over flat terrain with wind patterns that behave nothing like the rotor turbulence that builds inside alpine valleys in the afternoon. His brother Dean had no license at all, but Dean trusted Felix. That trust would cost him. The guide flagged wind shear at the primary launch site before either of them had finished adjusting their harnesses. Wind shear in the Interlaken Valley is not a minor variable. It is the reason experienced alpine pilots check conditions every 15 minutes, not once at briefing. The shear that morning showed a 14-knot differential between the ridge and the valley floor, enough to collapse one side of a wing mid-turn. Felix looked at the wind indicator, then he looked at his brother, then he looked at the guide and said he had flown in worse. The guide asked him to describe the worst conditions he had ever launched in. Felix described a thermal day in Mendoza with gusty crosswinds. The guide listened carefully. Then he explained that what Felix had described was a beginner-level wind event by alpine standards. Felix did not appreciate that comparison. He signed the operator's disclaimer, listed his Mendoza hours, 41 total, and launched from a secondary site the guide had not approved. Dean followed him without hesitation. The guide stood at the ridge and watched both wings enter the rotor band he had spent 20 minutes trying to describe. Felix's wing collapsed at 60% on the left side. He recovered partially but lost 300 feet in the correction and landed hard on a forested slope below the designated zone, sustaining a broken collarbone and a fractured wrist. Dean did not recover. His wing collapsed fully. He deployed his reserve at an altitude too low for full inflation and impacted a steep meadow at reduced but still unsurvivable speed. 41 hours of Argentine paragliding. That was Felix's credential. The guide's warning had been heard by both brothers and dismissed by the one who believed his license made him qualified to dismiss it. Nadia Verlaine was not afraid of impact. She had spent 11 years racing motocross at a semi-professional level and had broken her left clavicle twice, her right wrist once, and 3 ribs on a single crash in Lyon in 2019. She described these injuries the way other people describe travel stories, casually, with a kind of pride. She arrived at the speed flying briefing in Chamonix wearing her own helmet. It was a motocross helmet, full face, well-made, genuinely protective in the context it was designed for. But speed flying in the Mont Blanc Massif is not motocross. The flight profile involves sustained G-forces, rapid altitude loss, and the aerodynamic demand of keeping your head position stable at speeds between 80 and 140 kilometers per hour in thin mountain air. The operator-issued helmet was an aerodynamic speed-flying design shaped to reduce drag-induced head movement at high velocity. Nadia's motocross helmet would act as a sail. The guide explained this. He used the word sail. He was specific about what that meant at 100 kilometers per hour. Nadia said she had taken worse hits than anything this mountain could offer. The guide asked her to sign a form acknowledging she had refused the recommended equipment. She signed it. She added a small smiley face next to her signature. The guide kept the form. At 112 kilometers per hour on the second run, the drag on Nadia's helmet snapped her head back at the exact moment she was initiating a left carve turn. The movement broke her concentration on the wing input. The wing surged forward. She entered an uncontrolled tuck position and impacted the slope at the bottom of the run at a speed the incident report described as critical. Nadia Verlaine survived, but she sustained a C5 vertebral fracture that left her with permanent partial paralysis in both hands. She had taken worse hits, but she had never before given the impact a mechanical advantage. Here is something most people do not know about wingsuit proximity flying. The pilot is not the most important variable. The line is. A line, in proximity flying terms, is the specific flight path through terrain, a narrow corridor between rock faces, ridge lines, and tree canopies that a pilot must thread at speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. Every line is assessed individually. Conditions change. A line that was clean on Tuesday can be fatal on Wednesday because of a wind direction shift of 15 degrees. Brennan Locke had 800,000 followers and had completed 46 documented wingsuit flights. He was not reckless by the standards of his online community, but his community was not the one certifying lines in the Ticino Valley of southern Switzerland. His guide refused to certify the specific line Brennan had chosen. The refusal was based on a wind assessment, a crosswind component at the exit point that would push Brennan's flight path 11 meters left of the planned corridor. 11 meters at that location was the difference between the corridor and the rock face. Brennan had his GoPro running. He discussed the situation on camera. He described the guide as overly cautious. He used the phrase, "These guys always hedge." He launched. The footage was recovered intact. It shows the crosswind beginning to affect the flight path at exactly the point the guide had identified. It shows Brennan's correction attempt. It shows the rock face. The investigators who reviewed the footage noted that Brennan's technique was sound. His inputs were correct. He simply had no margin left to apply them into. The guide had known that before the jump. He had tried to say so. 800,000 people eventually watched the recovery footage. Most of them did not know there had been a guide, or that the guide had said no. Claire Ashford had 6 solo paragliding flights. In the context of her friend group, that made her the expert. The group had booked a tandem paragliding experience in Queenstown, New Zealand. 5 friends, 1 shared booking, 1 guide who had been flying that valley for 9 years. The guide identified a problem before the first launch: a developing convergence zone where 2 air masses meet and create unpredictable vertical movement was building over the lake. It was not yet dangerous, but it was trending. His recommendation was a 90-minute delay. Claire told the group they were fine. She had flown in convergence before. The guide asked her where. She named a coastal site in Portugal. The guide explained that coastal convergence and alpine lake convergence are structurally different phenomena. Claire nodded in a way that communicated she did not find this distinction meaningful. The group looked to Claire. Claire looked at the sky. Claire said go. The guide's written assessment recommending delay was presented to each member of the group for signature. 4 of them signed without reading it. Claire did not sign at all. She had already walked to the launch point. 3 of the 5 flights were uneventful. The convergence zone reached the launch area on the 4th flight, Claire's tandem with the guide himself. The vertical movement inside it lifted their wing 12 meters in under 2 seconds, then dropped it. The guide executed an emergency landing in a field 400 meters from the designated zone. Claire walked away with bruised ribs and a sprained ankle. But the 5th flight, the last member of the group, launched 30 seconds after Claire's emergency, entered the convergence zone at full altitude with no experienced pilot on board. That passenger spent 11 days in a Queenstown hospital, 6 solo flights. That was the credential that overruled 9 years of valley knowledge. Victor Soren was self-certified. In powered paragliding, certification requirements vary significantly by country. In some jurisdictions, there is no mandatory licensing at all. Victor had trained himself using online video tutorials, a second-hand engine unit, and a field outside Ankara. He had logged an estimated 90 hours of flight time. Estimated because he kept no formal logbook. He arrived in Cappadocia, Turkey as a tourist but brought his own equipment. He approached a local operator not for instruction but for a weather briefing. The operator's senior pilot reviewed the morning forecast and told Victor the weather window was closing. A pressure system moving in from the northwest would reach the valley within 40 minutes. 40 minutes was not enough time for the flight Victor had planned. Victor thanked him, studied the forecast data for several minutes, and concluded that the model was being conservative. He launched at 7:14 a.m. The pressure system arrived at 7:51 a.m., 3 minutes ahead of the forecast, not behind it. What Victor had not accounted for is that meteorological models for the Cappadocia Basin are built on decades of local observation data. The operator who briefed him had lived and flown in that valley for 14 years. Victor had been in the country for 4 days. The GPS track recovered from Victor's unit shows a clean, controlled flight for the first 22 minutes. Then the track shows the wind event, ground speed jumping from 31 kilometers per hour to over 90 kilometers per hour in less than 40 seconds as the system's leading edge hit the valley. A powered paraglider cannot outrun that differential. Victor attempted to land in a field southeast of the main tourist flight zone. The engine unit survived the impact largely intact. Victor did not. He had decided the professional forecast was being conservative. The atmosphere did not share that interpretation. Ingrid Falk had completed over 300 base jumps and understood malfunction statistics better than most recreational skydivers. Her argument for waiving the reserve parachute on a tandem skydive in Empuriabrava, Spain, was not ignorance, it was philosophy. She believed the reserve added bulk that altered her body position in the freefall. She submitted this reasoning in writing. The operator was legally permitted to accept the waiver under the applicable jurisdiction. The senior instructor on duty was not comfortable with it, but was not the signatory authority that day. The malfunction that occurred was a line over, one of the most recoverable failures in sport parachuting, provided the jumper has a reserve. The suspension lines crossed over the top of the canopy and prevented full inflation. In normal circumstances, the jumper reaches for the reserve handle. The sequence takes under 2 seconds. Ingrid did not have 2 seconds. She did not have a reserve. She had 300 base jumps. She had assessed the risk and found it acceptable. But base jumping is a discipline where you train without a reserve because exit altitude makes one impossible. She had transferred that philosophy into an environment where reserves are not impossible, they are standard. The two disciplines shared an activity. They did not share a logic. Leon Obi arrived in Nepal with a specific plan. He had researched a combined bungee to paragliding transition jump, a niche format where a jumper exits a bungee platform and transfers midair into a paraglider harness carried by an accompanying pilot. The physics of the transition require precise timing and a specific altitude window. The senior guide refused Leon's proposed modification. Leon wanted a lower exit point, which would compress the transition window from 6 seconds to under 3. The guide's minimum requirement was 6. Leon did not argue with the senior guide. He found a junior staff member in his second month of employment and negotiated the modification with him directly. The junior staff member did not have authority to approve protocol changes. He also did not know that. The transition window Leon's modification created was 2.8 seconds. The paraglider pilot had been told to expect 6. At 2.8 seconds, the harness clip engaged under lateral load rather than vertical load. It held for 1.4 seconds. Leon Obi fell 63 meters into the river gorge below the platform. He had found the one person in the operation who could not say no, because that person did not yet understand what no was protecting. The senior guide, when he learned what had happened, said he had refused the same modification request twice before from other clients. Both times the client had accepted the refusal and completed the standard jump safely. Leon had simply kept looking until he found a different answer. In extreme sports, that search is almost always the last one. Mara Stelling had never flown before. She booked a tandem paragliding flight in the Zillertal Valley in Austria as a birthday gift to herself and arrived at the briefing with a single question: "What do I need to do?" Her instructor told her. She wrote it down, all of it: the body position on launch, when to run, how to sit back into the harness once airborne, what to do if he said brake, what not to do under any circumstances. She did not ask whether the conditions were right. She had no previous flights to compare them to. She simply trusted the person whose entire professional existence was built around keeping people alive in the air. A thermal event struck the valley 40 minutes into the flight. The same event sent 2 more experienced companion flyers into emergency sequences. One sustained a wrist fracture, the other a man with 60 solo flights who had insisted on a more aggressive flight path, broke 2 ribs and a cheekbone when his wing collapsed in the surge. Mara and her instructor rode the thermal out. He told her to sit back. She sat back. He told her to keep her hands still. She kept them still. She did exactly what she had been told, without modification, without interpretation, without the interference of prior experience telling her she knew better. She landed in the designated zone. She thanked her instructor. She asked if that was normal. He told her it was not, but she had done everything right. Not because she was skilled, because she had made one decision before the flight began to treat her own instincts as irrelevant and the protocol as absolute. That decision cost her nothing. For 2 of the people flying alongside her that day, the absence of it cost everything.